Hello, everyone. Welcome to our weekly discussion series that's hosted by the Chaldean Cultural Center in collaboration with U of M Detroit Center, Unique Voices in Films, and CMN TV. Today, our special guest is Professor Charles Powell. Hello,
Hello,
welcome.
Ian. Thank you. Good to be with you.
Thank you. So Professor Powell, he earned his Ecumenical Doctor of Ministry degree at Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. He specializes in interreligious dialogues between Christians and Muslims. He traveled extensively throughout the Middle East and Europe, engaging in conversations with Muslim scholars and practitioners of Islam in order to have a deeper understanding and appreciation of the Islamic society. He is a visiting fellow at Oxford Center for Islamic Studies, University of Oxford in the UK. In addition, he engages in multi-faith dialogue and is an adjacent assistant teaching professor at the Ansari Institute for Global Engagement with Religion in the, how do you spell that school? How do you
Uh,
pronounce it? I'm sorry.
so the Ansari Institute for Global Engagement with Religion, that's in the Keough School of Global Affairs.
Wow, at the University of Notre Dame.
Yes.
So this seems to be a favorite topic of yours, the interreligious dialogues between Christians and Muslims, and it's really an important topic nowadays. But interestingly, how did you get involved in this? What is your background, and how did you get involved in this topic?
Well, William, again, it's great to be with you. Thank you for the good work that you are doing, especially in this area of interreligious dialogue as well. So I was born in Jackson, Mississippi, and then I grew up in an area called Crestview, Florida. I was introduced to the Baptist faith at a very young age. I grew up as a Baptist, went to Sunday school. Uh, Thought that I would one day become a Baptist minister, and sure enough, I did. After high school, I went into college, the Baptist College of Florida, in a little town called Graceville, Florida, where I did a bachelor's of theology. And interestingly enough, while I was doing my bachelor's of theology, I was a radio disc jockey during this time for Southern Gospel Radio. And during this time, I also had the opportunity to preach a few times a week on the radio. So that was a really good experience. I was not thinking about interfaith dialogue at this time, but there was really a lot of intra-faith dialogue going on since I was working at the radio station. After that, I went on to do my Master's of Divinity at the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. Did most of my master's there, but then relocated and finished up at the Luther Rice Seminary in Atlanta, Georgia. And one thing led to another. My wife, who is Emilia Justina Powell, and my two girls, Saskia, who is 9, and Scarlett, who is 15 and currently an exchange student in Poland, we made the decision to move to South Bend, Indiana. And my wife started teaching at the University of Notre Dame, and I started rethinking what I was going to do. At this time, I had been pastoring for almost 20 years, and I thought when moving here, I would continue to pastor, but as the saying goes, God had other plans in store for me. I met some Holy Cross priests at the University of Notre Dame, Father Lou Delfray and Father Tim Scully, and I shared with them what my interests were, and one thing led to another. Through a year of catechism, I wound up joining the Catholic Church. I was baptized as a Catholic in 2012, and I was sharing with these two priests what my interests are. I really wanted to have a better, more thorough understanding of the Islamic milieu, the larger Islamic community, and other faith traditions. And they said, Charles, you need to go to Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. The institution specializes in interreligious dialogue. And so I did that. And then I graduated from CTU with a Doctor of Ministry, specializing in Muslim-Christian relations 2 years ago now. So it was a really great experience. I had the opportunity to get to know many Muslims, both men and women. And it was just an incredibly good experience. But one of the reasons that I decided to get involved in interreligious dialogue. It was probably 2007, maybe 2008. I'm at a pastors' conference in Savannah, Georgia, and I am hearing a lot of pastors talk about the Prophet Muhammad, and many of them were very demeaning, and the comments that were made were very demeaning of the Prophet. And I came to realize that though they were speaking very critically of the Prophet, many of them knew very little about the Prophet Muhammad and knew very little about Islam. And I started noticing when I would visit churches at times, pastors would spend 30 minutes to an hour preaching against Islam, preaching against the Prophet Muhammad. And I started asking more questions like, well, who is the Prophet Muhammad? What is Islam? Is there a monolith? Are they distinct? Are they unique, etc.? And so birthed out of those experiences, I started studying interreligious dialogue, particularly Muslim-Christian dialogue.
Oh, that's like a very, very interesting path and how you led. So it was the fact that you felt like there was some information that you didn't like the atmosphere and the conversations that were happening.
A lot of negative rhetoric.
Negative instead of maybe, that's why communication, in my opinion, is so important.
Absolutely.
Because it's not just about knocking the other belief down, whether on a political level or religious level, but in order for us to learn and understand the other, we have to converse. And if you're going to use negativity, that right away is going to shut the other person down. Or, as happened in your case, you decided to research more into this and look at really what Islam is all about.
Absolutely.
But given that, and your interest arose in like 2012, but shortly after that, there's been a lot of situations in the Middle East against Christians and other minorities, sometimes amounting to genocide, the violence, and it's ongoing in parts of the Middle East. This has prompted, in the case of like the Chaldeans, an exodus in the past 2 decades, according to a report commissioned by the British Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt. So how have Muslims and Christians been able to address these ongoing issues through dialogue? Have they done so, or maybe is it something too deep to even address?
Well, you certainly have dictators who don't want to relinquish power, economies that are on the brink of collapse. Some have collapsed. Some governments are certainly infected with widespread corruption. In some countries, you have religious people arguing over differences of doctrines and worldviews. In places like Yemen, you have powerful outside powers like Saudi Arabia and Iran supporting groups within. And consequently, they have an ongoing civil war. I think one of the greatest institutions that tackles many of the problems that we see in our world today is certainly the World Council of Churches. And the WCC produced a document titled Issues in Christian-Muslim Relations, whereby they address many of these concerns. And I often keep this document nearby so that I can go to it when I need to. I don't think I have it with me here, but basically, they're really saying when it comes to interreligious dialogue and trying to bring people together, we need to be able to come from a posture of respect. Even when we find ourselves disrespected, we need to put on what's called that priestly ear, listen to the other side, try to hear where they are coming from. I think listening skills are seriously inadequate in dysfunctional families, congregations, and traditions, and we see this worldwide. So we really have to work on listening better to what are the frustrations that the other side is enduring. And as I have traveled around to various parts of the world, I think that I see what Abraham Maslow in his 1943 paper on the theory of human motivation said were the 7 fundamental human needs, which are safety and survival, understanding and growth, connection or love and acceptance, contribution and creation, esteem, identity, significance, self-direction, freedom, justice, self-fulfillment, and self-transcendent, which are spiritual needs. This is worldwide. People want this in their lives, and religious leaders can help bring this about through grassroots movements, through speaking with policymakers, and religious leaders can help their own congregation understand that just as they need and have these 7 fundamental human needs, so do other people. So how can we come together? And that's what interreligious dialogue often tackles. And that's why I'm very happy to be part of it.
And we do see that happening in the United States and in other Western parts of the world, where there is an attempt to try to listen to one another. Do you find that it's harder to do this in the Middle East, given that your travels? Or I don't know about Europe. I mean, I'm in the United States. We've sensed we've lived fairly peacefully amongst each other in comparison to other lands. But do you feel the same type of communication, or is it harder to communicate in the Middle East because of certain political tensions?
Well, I certainly think that it can be, and I think that it is. But I think that through education, through travel, through really social media, the word is getting out that it doesn't have to be a certain way. There are other ways of engagement. There are other ways of living. There are other worldviews that compete with each other. And I know my own narrative has changed significantly because I've had the opportunity to travel quite a bit. Now, having said that, there are several documents that have been put out in recent years. One would be a common word between us and you that was authored by Prince Ghazi bin Muhammad bin Talal of Jordan. The document was co-signed in 2006. It was co-signed by, I believe, 138 Islamic personalities. 38 Islamic scholars representing all branches of Islam signed it. And this was an open letter to then Pope Benedict, a letter stating that Muslims and Christians can and indeed should work together to bring an end to injustice throughout the world. So that's one document that Muslims are, for the most part, aware of, and more Christians are becoming aware of that. Another document, the Aman message, started as a detailed statement released on the eve of the 27th of Ramadan, 1425, which would be November 2004. And it was issued by King Abdullah II of Jordan. And this particular document sought to declare what Islam is and what it is not. And it went above and beyond the cultural wars that are taking place. It went above and beyond what a family might believe. And it declared, this is what Islam is. This is what Islam is not. Now, it was general, but still the word was getting out. So I think there are a lot of leaders in the Middle East that are saying, hey, let's slow down. Let's be reflective. Let's think about what we're doing. Maybe what we're doing isn't in line with the Quran. Maybe it is an outlier. Maybe this isn't how we should be interpreting certain passages of the Quran. Maybe the hermeneutic has been bad. And so you have a lot of Islamic scholars today really paving a new road for people in the Middle East who are Muslim, who might feel entrapped in some way. And they're certainly helping people in the West have a better understanding of what Islam is and what Islam is not. And you know, I tell my students all the time at Holy Cross College, if you get anything out of my class on Muslim-Christian relations, I want you to understand that Islam is not a monolith. It is very distinct, at times even a contradiction.
Yes, and I'm interested to know if, I know that you're working on a book, a project titled The Power of Narrative Empathy, A Path to Muslim-Christian Dialogue for Southern Baptists. If you can tell us what this book is about, and if it addresses some of the issues that you're discussing today, including what you teach your students, what you say that you teach your students. especially
Yeah.
like with regards to the contradictions, because that's something, especially not just the Christians, but other religions have brought up a lot.
Hmm. So it's a very good question, and the book is it's a manuscript. It's with the editor now, and hopefully will be published before too terribly long. For those of us who write books, you know it can be a very daunting task. Uh, there's a lot of work that goes into it, and a lot of criticism that often comes back. You know, to go back to a question that you had asked me earlier to lead into this work that I'm doing on the book. Like I mentioned, I used to be a Southern Baptist minister. Now I'm working within the Catholic Church, and I think that one of the councils that really, one of the influencers that really changed my life was the council that took place, Vatican II, 1962 to 1965. And one of its main concerns was to apostolate to a world that was undergoing great transformation and a return to unity among Christians. And one of those particular declarations was Nostra Aetate, which in Latin is in our time. And in this particular declaration, the church examined more closely her relationship to non-Christian religions. And in her task of promoting unity and love among humans, indeed among nations, she considered above all in this declaration what humans have in common and what draws them to fellowship. So that's what really spurred me and encouraged me to write this book. The other thing that really encouraged me to write this book on the power of narrative empathy, a pathway forward for Southern Baptists to consider when reaching out to Muslims, is that there are 1.8 billion Muslims in the world. We need to know who the Muslims are. We need to know how distinct they are. I was at the Global Symposium on Interreligious Dialogue in Muscat, Oman in 2019, and I was sitting with Rabbi Mark Schneier. Rabbi Mark Schneier is an American rabbi. He is president of the Foundation for Ethnic Understanding. And I was sitting at a dinner table with him, and the rabbi said to me, Charles, listen very closely. Here's something very important that I want you to know. And it has stayed with me. He said, Charles, we share, referring to the Abrahamic faith traditions, we share a common faith and we share a common fate. And when he said that to me, it took me aback, and I realized how important it is that instead of going to war, we engage in dialogue, we engage in education. We have these constructive, meaningful, good, and worthwhile conversations. There is a quote that was given by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. When he was alive, and this quote has also always really stuck with me. And basically, what he says is, men often hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They don't know each other because they cannot communicate, and they cannot communicate because they are separated. So my book aims to bring that wall down, to bring that barrier down. You know, when you engage in interreligious dialogue, it's not about giving up your own beliefs, but it is about coming to the table and through the power of narrative empathy, trying to understand where that other person is coming from. Because when I speak with a Jew, when I speak with a Christian, when I speak with a Muslim, all three of them, they all believe they're right. And they all believe that they've done the needed research. They believe they have all the answers to all the questions
Of
that are out
course.
there. And so where do you go? You come to an impasse.
You know, I love what you just said about the fact that engaging in a dialogue about the different religions, it's not about changing your beliefs. It's just listening. I enjoy listening to so many different stories, to so many. I've traveled to Europe, to the Middle East, in different parts, and for me, that observation was truly fun. You know, listening, and it doesn't. I don't have to convert. I don't have to become this. I don't have to decide to change my wardrobe or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I come back with whatever riches I have gathered and incorporate that. And I also have the choice to decide the things that don't serve me, not to include them, you know. And that's the beauty of what we have in this world, is making these kind of choices. So I love everything that you're saying, and it would seem that the world, I majored in communication, and as a storyteller myself, I understand the value of that. But sometimes it's surprising how many people are afraid to enter certain
They
conversations.
really
And
are.
yeah, and this was going to be my next question, because on one hand, in the past, it would surprise me, like, why can't we? I found out early on in my writing career that there were some passages that the editor would say, well, you can't say that, you know, and you can't. And I was thinking, oh, really? But, you know, it seems confusing. Like, why can't I? I'm not saying a lie. And it's like, it's things that are out there, you know, these are facts. But there was always a twist on how you can say things. And this was in my younger years. And I didn't take it too much to heart. But over the years, and as I keep getting older, I'm finding that given, for instance, the current political situation where people, you know, are afraid to being canceled or punished for expressing certain views. Given what's happening with that, how can people get involved in an honest and healthy dialogue, let alone in an interreligious dialogue,
Yeah, sure.
where
Thank
we
you for
can
the,
be honest and not
yeah.
just kind of give a superficial
Mm.
discussion, just so that because we're afraid we're like walking on eggshells?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, when you think about interreligious dialogue, I think it's important to think about personalities such as the great late Archbishop Desmond Tutu. I think it's important to think of the late Pope John Paul II. I think it's important to think of people who are engaged, and they're not engaged in a way that is just full of fluff. They're engaged with real concerns, real issues, because, you know, I'm a student of practical theology, and practical theology begins in the messiness of life and then tries to say, okay, how can our faith traditions improve this way of life that we are in? And I tell my students, look, interreligious dialogue is, it can be about sitting around and singing kumbaya, but it is so much more than that. It has really become a cottage industry today, and we see interreligious dialogue happening in living rooms, but we also see the academy engaged in this, and we see other grand institutions engaged in this. And it's about coming to the table, bringing your whole self, allowing the other side to bring their whole selves, and engaging in issues and questions that people need answers to. And that can be really messy, but that's sometimes calling people out in a respectful way. But you call them out and you say, you know, this is not in line with the Talmud. This is not in line with the Bible. This is not in line with the Quran, according to the greater scholarly work. And you address those particular issues. You know, Wim, I've had the opportunity now to travel to several U.S. mosques, from near where you are, Dearborn, to New York, Mobile, Alabama, Jacksonville, Florida, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I've been to mosque in Oxford, England. I've been to mosque in Bahrain and Oman, etc. And I've had the opportunity to be at the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies at Oxford, UK. And I've participated in events that deal with dialogue. And I can tell you that out of the many people I have met, I've had the opportunity to meet female activists in Bahrain, female law professors, female human rights activists, important government officials and lawyers, women who are really making a powerful impact in the world that they are living in. They're setting examples for other women to follow. I shared with you before we went on the air a lady named Anila Ali, who is with the American Muslims Multi-Faith Women's Empowerment Council, a powerful woman personality. She's from Pakistan. She's based out of Washington, D.C. But these are women that are speaking truth to power. These are women that say, wait a minute, this is not what the Quran says. This is more cultural, or this is more familial. What does the Quran say? And I remind people too that it wasn't the Prophet Muhammad who asked Khadijah to marry him. It was Khadijah who asked the Prophet Muhammad to marry her. So I say to people who feel trapped in some way, just continue to be consistent, continue to speak up, continue to speak out, and know what you're talking about.
Yes. And really, these are words of wisdom, because it's continue to speak up, and then the people that are maybe feeling quick to judge or quick to feel offended, maybe just listen for a little bit, because sometimes there's a healing that happens, and the person that might be speaking up, even if they initially sound that there's anger, the opportunity is for the listener, if they can, by the way they're listening, they have the opportunity to respond. Communication is so important, because then you have that's where the dialogue happens, and then you can go back and forth. So rather than shutting somebody up, we can use this opportunity again, even if the person might be, due to cultural background, might speak in a different way or be more passionate about what they're discussing.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we were to give people a chance to listen, and I'm so glad that you're saying that women are so involved, because as I was mentioning earlier, I too have come across many very empowering Muslim women who are making huge changes.
Yeah, don't buy
in
into
their
the
countries,
stereotype that you
right?
see on television
That's
and in movies.
I love that. Don't be caught up in that, which it seems like people are more comfortable with the stereotypes. So, but these women are determined to make a change, whether it is in their native countries, whether it is here in the U.S., because for some this is their native country. So yeah, I really enjoy what you're saying, and maybe we can also then talk about the American Church. Since your involvement in that goes very far as well. So you say that for nearly 2 decades, you have pastored a number of churches in different parts of the United States. How has the church changed over the years, in your view?
Yeah. I'm thinking about this. It's changed in some ways. Some churches have changed a lot, some churches haven't. I think it's a challenging question for me to answer, because the Christian church in the United States is represented by many distinctive denominations. Some are Orthodox, some are fundamental, some are evangelical, some are very progressive. And you will often find congregants disagreeing with each other in the same congregation over political leanings, hermeneutics, social concerns, and so on and so forth. I don't think they're just like in the Muslim faith, there is no monolith. There is no monolith within the Christian church, no one single story. Now, to use an old English proverb, birds of a feather do tend to flock together. And I think most people want to peacefully worship God on a Sunday morning. So it stands to reason that individual churches do tend to be more alike than different. Now, having said that, it is my opinion that the church has become more political. And by way of illustration, the evangelical church tends to lean Republican. The mainline Protestant church tends to lean Democrat. Within the Catholic Church in America, you have those who are more conservative and those who are more progressive. I also see a lot more anger within the church, and that's really concerning to me. A lot of Christians are angry. They feel like the church is losing the battle against immorality, losing the battle against atheism, evolution, losing the battle against competing worldviews. I would simply say to church leaders and congregants, don't give in to anger. Don't give in to fear. Don't give in to security. Be a faith of hope. Be a faith of love. Be a faith of charity. I would say be as constant as the northern star in these areas. And I believe that this will attract outsiders and encourage insiders to work together to bring an end to hate and injustices throughout the world. And it can really help intra-faith dialogue and interfaith dialogue when the church is less political and more filled with love, hope, charity goes a long way. And there's so much more I could say to that.
No, but that's
basically,
beautiful. That's like the heart of the whole thing, is that when you come from a place of love, people, whether it's a church or wherever, you're attracted to that love. That's what draws you into that church. And so, yeah, coming from
and
a
for
place of love
Christians,
is very
the
important.
greatest commandment, love God and love neighbor. And that's what the church needs to be true to.
Yes. And Christians are known for having that type of, promoting unconditional love. And so churches that really live by that, you can feel it, and you want to be a part of that
Water
community.
it, fertilize it, help it grow. Yeah.
Yes. Well, our half hour is up. Any last words of wisdom, Professor? I mean, this was very nice, and I can feel I can talk to you about this subject forever, because I do see how you really come from a place of love and a place of peace, and wanting to create that peace between the two communities.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, I do enjoy country music. I guess that's the Southern boy in me, having grown up along the Gulf Coast. But there is a song that a country music singer sang not too long ago, and part of the lyric is, "Always try to be humble and kind." So I would say, be humble and be kind. Defend those who cannot defend themselves. Be tolerant. Be respectful. Don't shy away from a constructive conversation. And finally, just know that you don't know it all, so err on the side of caution.
Yeah, well, I've really gotten to appreciate the lyrics of country music over the years, because they have so much depth and meaning. So thank you for that. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.